Are you lying awake at 2 a.m., scrolling through your phone, unable to fall asleep? Well, you're not alone. Tonight, I'm here to tell you a true story from Ottoman history that's so bizarre, so shocking, that it might just be the perfect distraction for your restless mind. Welcome to Ottoman Mysteries After Dark, where we explore real historical events for those midnight hours when sleep just won't come. I'm your host, and tonight we're diving into the documented, verified, absolutely true story of Sultan Ibrahim I, a man whose reign was so strange that Ottoman historians struggled to record it without seeming like they were writing fiction. But before we begin, I have a question for you night owls out there. What time is it where you are right now, and what's keeping you awake tonight? Drop a comment below and let our sleepless community know you're not alone in your midnight wandering. Now settle back and let me tell you about events that actually happened in Constantinople between 1640 and 1648, during what historians call the reign of the Mad Sultan. Sultan Ibrahim I came to power in 1640 after spending 22 years locked in what the Ottomans called the cage, a luxurious prison within Topkapi Palace, where potential heirs were kept to prevent them from plotting against the ruling sultan. When his brother Murad I died suddenly, Ibrahim was released from this golden cage and declared Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. But 22 years of isolation had taken their toll. Palace chroniclers document that Ibrahim exhibited behaviors so unusual that even by Ottoman standards, and remember this is an empire known for eccentric rulers, he stood out as extraordinarily strange. Here's where our story gets truly bizarre. And remember, this is all documented in Ottoman palace records and foreign diplomatic reports. Ibrahim developed an obsession with extremely obese women. This wasn't just a preference. It became a compulsion that dominated his reign and shocked the entire empire. Palace records show that Ibrahim issued imperial decrees ordering his agents to search the entire empire for the heaviest women they could find. The Sultan's agents scoured every province from the Balkans to Mesopotamia, looking for women who met Ibrahim's very specific requirements. According to documented accounts, the woman who became his favorite concubine, Sheker Pare, weighed over 3. Her name literally meant sugar cube, and Ottoman chroniclers wrote that Ibrahim was so obsessed with her that he would spend entire days just watching her eat. But the obsession went beyond individual women. Ibrahim ordered the palace kitchens to prepare massive feasts, specifically designed to help his concubines gain even more weight. Palace account books, which still exist in the Ottoman archives, show astronomical expenses for food, not for state banquets or military provisions, but for feeding the Sultan's ever-expanding. Foreign ambassadors wrote detailed reports back to their home countries about these bizarre imperial policies. The Venetian ambassador recorded that Ibrahim had ordered the construction of special furniture throughout the palace to accommodate larger women, including beds that required teams of carpenters to build and chairs that needed reinforced foundation. The strangest documented incident occurred in 1647, when Ibrahim became convinced that his favorite concubine, Sheker Pare, was having an affair. What happened next is so shocking that multiple historical sources confirm it, because it created a diplomatic crisis that reached courts across Europe. Ibrahim ordered all 280 women in his harem to be tied up in weighted sacks and thrown into the Bosphorus Strait, every single one. This wasn't a fit of temporary madness. Palace records show that Ibrahim spent 3 days personally overseeing the drowning of 2. The only woman who survived was one who managed to escape the sack and swim to shore, where she was rescued by a passing French ship. Her testimony, recorded by French diplomats, provides our most detailed account of this horrific event. She described how Ibrahim watched from the palace windows as his guards carried out his orders, and how he seemed to derive some twisted satisfaction from the entire process. But here's what makes this story even more disturbing, and this detail appears in multiple independent historical sources. Ibrahim immediately ordered his agents to begin searching the empire again for new women to replace those he had just murdered. Within weeks, new groups of women were arriving at the palace, completely unaware of the fate that had befallen their predecessors. Palace physicians' reports, preserved in the Ottoman archives, describe Ibrahim's mental state during this period. They documented that he suffered from severe insomnia, spent hours talking to himself, and exhibited what they called fits of uncontrollable rage, followed by periods of complete withdrawal where he would refuse to see anyone for days. The insomnia is particularly relevant for tonight's sleepless audience. According to medical records kept by his personal physician, Ibrahim would often stay awake for 3 or 4 days straight, wandering the palace corridors and making increasingly erratic decisions. His sleep deprivation became so severe that palace guards were instructed to follow him at all times to prevent him from harming himself or others during his midnight wandering. During one documented sleepless period in winter 1647, Ibrahim became convinced that the Golden Horn of Istanbul was trying to communicate with him. He ordered boats to be positioned in the water at specific angles, believing this would help him understand the harbor's messages. Foreign ships entering Istanbul harbor reported the bizarre sight of Ottoman naval vessels, arranged in seemingly random patterns, all on the direct orders of their sleep-deprived sultan. The economic impact of Ibrahim's obsessions was devastating and well documented. Treasury records show that he spent more on feeding his harem than the empire spent on its entire military. When his advisors tried to explain that the empire was facing financial crisis, Ibrahim's recorded response was to order them to find fatter women and more food as a solution to economic problems. But perhaps the most chilling documented aspect of Ibrahim's reign was his relationship with violence. Palace chroniclers record that he would order executions for the most trivial reasons: a servant spilling food, a guard coughing during a ceremony, a concubine who didn't eat quickly enough during meals. The Grand Vizier's diary, discovered in palace archives in the 20th century, provides a day-by-day account of trying to govern an empire while managing a ruler who was becoming increasingly detached from reality. One entry describes a council meeting where Ibrahim spent 2 hours discussing the proper way to weigh women, while reports of military defeats and provincial rebellions remained unaddressed. The breaking point came in 1648, when even Ibrahim's own mother, the powerful Valide Sultan Kosem Sultan, decided that her son had to be removed from power. This decision wasn't made lightly. It marked the first time in Ottoman history that a mother had actively participated in deposing her own son. The deposition was carefully planned and documented. On August 8, 1648, a group of janissaries and palace officials, with the approval of Islamic religious authorities, entered Ibrahim's chambers and informed him that he was no longer sultan. Palace records show that Ibrahim's response was to ask if he could keep just one of his concubines and continue his special feeding program on a smaller scale. 10 days later, Ibrahim was found dead in his palace chamber. The official cause of death was listed as natural causes, but multiple historical sources suggest he was assassinated by Janissary commanders who feared he might somehow return to power. The aftermath of Ibrahim's reign was so traumatic for the Ottoman Empire that official historians struggled with how to record these events. Many details were initially suppressed or minimized in official chronicles, which is why the full extent of his bizarre behavior only became clear when historians gained access to previously secret palace archives and foreign diplomatic records. What makes Ibrahim's story particularly fascinating from a psychological perspective is how it illustrates the devastating effects of prolonged isolation, followed by absolute power. 22 years in the cage had clearly affected his mental development, and when he was suddenly given unlimited authority over millions of people, the results were catastrophic. Modern historians who have studied Ibrahim's reign note that his obsessions and violent behavior patterns are consistent with several documented psychological conditions. particularly those related to trauma from prolonged isolation and the absence of normal social development during crucial years. The story of Sultan Ibrahim serves as a stark reminder of how power without accountability, combined with untreated mental health issues, can lead to devastating consequences for entire civilization. His 8-year reign nearly bankrupted the Ottoman Empire and resulted in the deaths of hundreds of innocent people. For those of us lying awake tonight, Ibrahim's story also illustrates the destructive power of chronic insomnia. His sleep deprivation clearly contributed to his increasingly poor decision-making and violent behavior. While our own sleepless nights probably won't lead to such dramatic consequences, Ibrahim's documented experience shows how lack of sleep can seriously impair judgment and emotional regulation. As you think about your own reasons for being awake tonight, remember that throughout history, some of the most significant events have occurred during the dark hours when sleep wouldn't come. Not all of them were positive. Ibrahim's midnight wanderings led to some of history's most tragic decisions. But unlike Sultan Ibrahim, we have the benefit of historical perspective, medical knowledge, and the understanding that our temporary insomnia doesn't grant us the power to reshape the world according to our sleep-deprived thoughts. So tell me, night owls, what do you think about Sultan Ibrahim's true story? Have you ever made decisions during sleepless nights that you regretted the next day? Let me know in the comments what historical lessons resonate with your own midnight experience. Sweet dreams to those who find them tonight, and thoughtful wakefulness to those who don't. Tomorrow we'll explore another true story from Ottoman history, the documented case of the village that actually did disappear overnight in 1456, leaving behind only empty houses and a mystery that Ottoman investigators never solved. Until then, remember that history's strangest stories are often the true ones, and that even in our sleepless moments, we're connected to countless others throughout time who have stared at the ceiling, wondering what tomorrow might bring.